Today I'm going to talk about the GIST Core Ontology. I'm going to be rattling through a whole bunch of slides. What I want to do is to give you an overview, and I would hope that you will be able to take a look at the slide deck in due course as it gets distributed and perhaps peruse them at a slightly slower rate. The important thing about it is that an ontology is there to present a representation of meaning of things. And when we talk, when we use words, we're usually using them to refer to things, and the things have got some sort of thought representation. And if two people don't have the same thought at the same word about the same thing, then they don't have this reference. And so there's no shared representation. And so there's ambiguity, and we end up not being able to communicate. And machines are no different. And the important thing about it is that instead of words, what we want to use is IRIs, internationalized resource identifiers, rather than strings. And in that world, we can then begin to start working with the development of representations of reality and representations of concepts using the resource description framework, where we have one thing identified by an IRI, another thing identified by an IRI, and some predicate, some relationship in between them. When we're talking about ontologies, also what we do is that we describe things in classes. Classes are sets of things with the same characteristics, and individuals or instances might be members of that class. And from the class definitions, what we can do is organize class and subclass relationships to organize the things, the classes, the sets of things that we're talking about in our representation of the world. What's also important is to be able to say that this class is not that class, so that we have the possibility of having disjoint statements. And then what we can do is allocate individuals to the membership of one or more classes. The other thing that's important in ontologies are these relationships. They often get forgotten. And it is the relationships that enable us to provide inference about instances. So properties are there to describe the relationships between things and types of things. And properties can be related to each other via a kind of property-subproperty relationship. Now, in normal language, sometimes when you're uncertain about the definition of something, for example, a cat, you say, what's a cat? And somebody could say, well, it's a mammal with pointed ears and retractable claws and a long tail, up to 4 legs, makes a purring noise, and so on. And this representation of an equivalent class is something that we do in describing ontologies as well. Now, why would you want to use a core ontology? Use it to save time, to ensure interoperability when you're doing anything about ontology work. You have your starter palette, you're creating classes and properties from this initial set of colors. You can also make sure that it's used as a lingua franca in your organization. And as you have a lingua franca of a small number of terms, you can use these to chunk thought. We use the GIST ontology, and it's there for a core ontology for any of the business types for which we're creating an ontology. It's available on a Creative Commons license. And this means that you too can use it. We use the GIST ontology. It's a very small number of classes, probably about 130 and about 80 odd properties. So we think that it's at the Goldilocks level of abstraction, not too abstract, not too detailed. These are the kind of things that we find are in the scope of GIST. These are the sort of terms that are used. They're readily identifiable as things that we would expect to see from our natural language. There aren't any obscure terms. So if you take a look at persons and organizations, they appear sometimes in very obvious ways, but then they also appear in other ways that we're not so sure about when we take a look at these sort of equivalent classes. So a person or an organization really crops up an awful lot. Organizations can be very general, but also what we can do is bring about certain amount of precision with narrowly defined organizations like government organizations. And here are some illustrations of how we can subclass from the gist terms into terms that are appropriate for an organization that needs a lot of definition of different types of organization. Various stuff here to do with physicality. Note that a building is three things. It's a physical thing. It's also potentially a place, and it might have an address. And these are all represented in very different ways in an ontology. For person in gist, make sure to know that fictional characters are not included. We have lots of different ways in the core of describing places and events. And things like commitments, intentions, agreements, and so on. Offers, very important in business. Catalog items. These are a kind of specification. Intentions, very important in describing things. Different forms of content. Different forms of content expression. Many times things have got identifiers. We don't necessarily want to spread loads of identifiers for a single thing across our workspace. So what we have is just ID, which acts as a sort of binder for the other identifiers that we use for a thing. Temporal relations, very important. Now we use a digital twin in many kind of ways. In investment banks, we need to mirror the organization. We need to cover the structure, the lines of business, the data flows, and so on. When we work with things like power companies, we've been needing to mirror the transmission networks, covering the components, the line connections, the voltages, and so on. So the important thing is that gist is very, very flexible. It's a core ontology that's easy for everybody to understand, and you can build out of it. The important thing about it in the digital twin world is that we're all making digital twins and referring to them in these talks, but there's nothing that ensures that we can have a certain amount of minimal representation that enables us to get this shared representation between different digital twins. If people were to use the gist ontology, which is readily understandable, very easy to build out from, we would actually end up with properly interconnected digital twins. And so I present it to you as being something that you might want to adopt, and details of how to find out about it are presented here. Thank you very much.
We often talk about ontologies within the community. There is a view that data scientists are capable of solving these data interoperability challenges if needed. Are ontologies key to delivering digital twins at scale, or are they simply accelerators to help deliver value more quickly?
I think that they're key to getting things to join up properly. One of the things that's really critical here is actually to try and put the ontology and all the links in before you start generating a plethora of data, rather than having the problem of trying to guess what the meaning actually is. So yes, I would say that they are about as key as deciding that we'll all use the same natural language. If we didn't, we can kind of roughly muck around to try and work out what somebody is saying, but we can't be absolutely sure.
Good. Link question for yourself, Peter, is are you aware of any organizations using this ontology work to align with other organizations yet? So cross-organizational working via the ontology.
Well, we do that, but one of the things that we will do is link through gist to other ontologies. We can make other ontologies kind of subclasses of gist, and in this way we've been working with different sides of companies, like in the electricity supply generation area, like in banking. Sometimes within a company, it's just as much a merging of information as it is between two separate companies. And then the other thing is that we are discussing GIST within the context of things like CODATA, where we're talking about bringing together cross-domain interoperability frameworks at scale for particularly like open scientific data. There is also work ongoing using GIST as a backbone to develop a general pharma ontology. So I would say that there are lots of green shoots here for this.
Peter, I've got probably 3 questions here I'm going to ask you in a sequence. Together as one question. Would there be a benefit of aligning with the IFC data scheme / does this align with IES4?
So, right, yes, there would be benefit in it. I mean, IFC says smart building. I mean, the benefit of a core ontology is that it enables us to take domain ontologies and to ensure that they are at some point linked. And that then means that it becomes particularly easy to look across data sets that are done in different domains and different domain ontologies, but have got content that is semantically the same. Often things like person, organization, data set, and so on get represented within domain ontologies, pre-existing domain ontologies, but there's a representation in a slightly different way. And if we kind of map these to a single core ontology class, we can then query down from that. It saves us not only an awful lot of time, but it also makes data management easier for things like personally identifiable information. I'm not certain about how well GIST aligns with IES4, but when we look at GIST in comparison with other core ontologies, we find that there are generally no problems with getting a good mapping. I think the key thing that I'm trying to present, though, about GIST, it's 2 things, really. The first thing is that it's in real use and has been by Semantic Arts over the past 20-odd years, and it's very, very well managed, updated, publicly available, with all sorts of things like that. Everybody can kind of join in. Although the governance is totally dealt with by Semantic Arts. And the other thing is that you won't find any obscure Latin in it or anything like that. It's the terms that are used are ones that most people can very quickly gather what they're about. The other thing is that there are precise definitions for every class and every property. It's extremely well documented. And there are lots of these equivalent classes that I was describing. And the importance of an equivalent class is that you can infer into the class. So again, it means that it's easier to reuse your information that you've currently got and try and work out in an automated way what class things belong to.